My name is Ben Bayer. I'm the executive editor for Fast Co Works, the content studio at Fast Company. And I'm super excited today to have this conversation because it's a little bit different discussion about digital transformation and transformation overall. It's a conversation about transformation and sustainability. And so Nooshin is joining us. She's the CEO and founder of Paxon Energy. And it's a company that is a little bit different for what you would get at RSA in a security conference, but a conversation that is right here because it's about disruption. So Nooshin, if you wouldn't mind, just start us off. Tell us a little bit about what Paxon Energy is and what you do and what your company does.
Right. So thank you so much for having me here. Paxon Energy, I started it about 6.5 years ago. We are a consulting management firm in the oil and gas and utility sector. Specifically, we study, I'd like to call us surgeons of the industry. We study the data and evaluate from an engineering perspective the health of, let's say, gas pipelines, electrical power poles, and then our R&D department have the technologies that recover methane emissions at mass scale. And what that means is that the flaring and the venting that you usually see at the oil and gas platforms, we actually eliminate that.
So what led you to start this company? Normally everyone thinks of oil and gas and it's coming out of, Houston, Texas, and the oil patch. So what led you to start this company? What was the thought behind it? And tell us a little bit about sort of the origin story.
Well, at the time, I was consulting for the gas utilities, and I'm an environmental engineer by trade. So I had this idea that I thought by myself, and I talked to a few California utility executives, and one of the things that's so great about the state of California, we are at the forefront of energy disruption, right? So I actually told them and said, I don't think you guys have any idea of what is your methane footprint, like how much carbon is coming in, how much is being released, whether it's as part of maintenance project, whether it's as part of leaks. And they looked at me and they're like, so we're not required by regulatory compliance. And I'm like, well, at some point you will be. And this is back when net zero didn't exist. This is when, the whole, it wasn't a requirement, right? So I basically presented, they said, put it on a deck. I presented to utility executives in California, and I asked for $40 million of worth of program value, and I got approved for 36, which was 10% cost saving initiatives. That's what they asked for, and that's how Paxon was incorporated.
So you're saying to yourself, the opportunity comes up and you're like, all right, I see this hole in the marketplace for where something doesn't exist that needs to exist. What were the challenges that came up when you were starting this up? Because it was brand new.
Well, I think for me, it wasn't so much thinking about what was existing or not existing in the market. I, as an environmental engineer, I had a passion to come up with the next solution. And I think before coming up with that solution, I asked the very basic question. What is your incoming and outgoing input of your energy production? If you don't know how much you're losing, what's the total number at the end of the day? And again, you're talking to an engineer. There is a break. There's something missing in the system, right? And I didn't have a business plan. I didn't think the company was going to become what it's become. At the time, I'd just gotten a divorce. I had $400,000 of attorney debt. And for me, from that point on, there wasn't any further down I could go. Things would only be looking up. So it was really following my passion with curiosity. Like, how can I solve this problem? And believe it or not, I actually lost the contract in 6 months to a very big company because they came and they're like, who is she? She just started the company. And like, we got this and many years of X, Y, and Z, but they had no idea of what we were going after. So what happened, we actually reverse engineered the idea, and we realized that we didn't want to go and actually report in terms of like how bad these companies were doing. We wanted to become part of the solution. So we went after technologies and companies that would allow us figure out how we can recover the waste. So technically, I am in the business of recovering the waste.
Many business leaders would go, all right, I lost my contract. This isn't going to work out. I'm going to fold up shop. So what was it within you that said, okay, I lost this one, but I'm going to keep going. I know there's something here.
I didn't have a job. I was basically out of job for like a month and a half until my next contract, which was actually worth, by the end of that year, we did over $300 million worth of project values. And today, Paxon has done over $7 billion worth of capital and expense type projects. I think for me it was just this inner voice and drive of okay, this idea didn't work. Clearly, it's so easy that another company can come and say, who is she? How can I do it better? And I think it was a wake-up call because I was like, if I were to come up with the data, it doesn't really solve anything. What else can I come up with? How else can we work within the industry so that we're solving something? Recovering emissions is a physical work that we're doing, and it does involve a lot of security. It does involve like technical information, machine learning. There's all the data and everything that goes with it as well.
So how does this work for your company? Like, what's a typical installation like for the average customer that you have when they're trying to install your platform, your technology on top of what they're doing?
So we went from an era that we had to educate our clients to the timeline that everybody's like, how soon can we get you guys look at our assets? So there are specific applications, and that we have to work specifically with the operator and the energy companies to redo their procedures, because there's a huge safety implications and involved, right? So when we get the projects, we assess those, and then it's about understanding like where we send these equipments. We don't just install. Everything happens on the job site at the time of the project, and at the time of loss, we recover it, we condense it, it turns into LNG, and we put it back into the system further down midstream.
And so these are pipeline companies typically that are, pipeline or drilling companies that are typically flaring out the methane previously, and now your technology comes in to help capture that and reclaim it so it's not flaring.
Absolutely. We help them operate in a more efficient way. It is heavily backed, considered research and development tax credits. And the whole idea is we're dealing with energy shortage. In 2023, why are we operating in such a wasteful way when we can actually be efficient, save money, and not vent the energy that otherwise would be lost?
Yeah. And in a climate where ESG is a top of mind for both certain state governments, the federal government, but also businesses overall, how much did the ESG environment also help support what you're trying to do with your business?
It really, really expedited everything. As I said initially, like we went from educating companies to why you need to do this, to them reaching out to us and saying, how soon can you come? We were just in Egypt meeting with the minister of petroleum there, and he said it's not the question of how you're going to get your equipment and engineers here. It's a matter of when, and this is a message that's coming from outside the U.S., right? Because we tend to be along with Europe at the forefront of sustainability, and so I think the market has shifted a lot with the companies, the countries, the policy changes. It's all been kind of like catalyzing the whole step towards net zero.
So take us through that. You got the initial contract, you lost it, you got the next contract, and then it's runaway growth. Back-to-back years in the top 10 of the Inc. 5000 or sister publication. So what was that growth like, and what is going to come next?
It's a lot of work. It takes a certain personality, to be able to have a vision and keep pushing for it. And it's exhausting because you're constantly growing the team. And we're very fortunate that my core group, everybody has 25 plus years of experience. We're a very value-driven company. We have the female inspections and engineers initiatives. We have veteran hiring initiative. It's everybody wants to be part of this movement, right? We're part of this movement. But as a CEO, that you're always challenging, you're being challenged. I mean, with the recent banking dilemma, like finances and access to capital. I'm a female-founded, female owner of a company. Those are all equal challenges. Then the work that we're doing, we weren't really affected by COVID from, economic standpoint, but there is a lot of different types of like the way that we were affected. Like, how do you manage a distributed workforce that nobody's allowed to leave their house? And then some parts of our work we were considered essential workers. But in all, it's I say, at least for me, it's not just enough to be resilient. You have to be relentless in the pursuit of your goals. And I think it is that relentless drive.
Well, you have to. But it also is something that is imperative if you want to be successful. We see this in sort of the peers and other leaders like that, but it's not easy, right? I mean, it takes a right mindset to get there, but it also takes a culture when you grow. So that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about is like, you went into this with thinking, I want the culture of my company to be different than what is typically found in the oil and gas industry, which is out there. So explain to us a little bit about sort of what your view is on your company culture and how do you make that happen?
I was actually just having this conversation with one of our directors who just joined the company. And I'm like, how we are different than other energy companies is that we want to have a forward thinking. That if you spend your entire career working for a company, it's not about coming into another bureaucracy. It's not doing the same thing in and out. We are consultants at heart. And our job is to find the next idea, the next technology, the next solution. And you will have the runway. And so I think that forward thinking and allowing the people to truly go after the ideas that they have and creating that platform, that is our culture, part of our culture. Another side of the culture is really helping the underserved communities, or at least when you come to oil and gas, there's less than 7% women all across executive roles. When you come to female C-level, it's 0.003%. So most of the time, I'm the only female in the room. So I feel it hard. Like I always tell my people, it doesn't matter where across the country. Find the women, hire them, entice them. We nurture them so that they can grow in their career. So I think part of the culture is having that. And I know I don't want to just label it as a diverse community. For us, it's about the value chain of how do you disrupt an energy industry by diversifying, whether they're female, whether they're a veteran, whether they have a different background than just your typical engineering and construction.
So it's a very interesting point. And I think sometimes companies are challenged to try to do it because I got to make this decision right now. But having the patient mindset to go and look out and look in non-traditional spaces to find candidates like you're talking about. Can you share a little bit about sort of like how that process went initially, but then also a little bit about what your next phase is going to be like? Because it sounds like the growth is going to continue and you're going to need to keep doing more of it.
I think one of the areas that we're very successful at is our connection to the industry. Our team is very, very involved in the oil and gas and energy sector, and that allows us to constantly get candidates and be able to actively recruit. And as I said, I don't have a requirement. You could be from Alaska and tomorrow you'll be working on a project in California. So part of that, we've opened it up to the entire U.S. and Canada market. We bring folks back and forth from Canada to here as well. We do have an office there as well. It's the ability to build a data set. And within the company, we have a data set of 11,000 vetted candidates as well, and constantly built upon it. But your typical going and supporting the schools. I serve in the advisory role for UC Davis, working with their entrepreneurship department and really seeing these individuals and kind of getting in at education level. That's one of the other areas that we try to get in newer talents early on and train them. This is an industry that you don't necessarily go and get that degree. You don't need a computer science degree to be able to work on, let's say, a pipeline project.
So there's a conversation that we were having about skills-based learning, and so it sounds like a lot about that is less about background and pedigree and more about what are the skill sets that the hires you're trying to bring to the table in terms of the approach, so that it opens up who you're able to attract to these roles.
I think in today's day and age, it's no longer just about IQ. EQ is so much more important. When we look at candidates, we first see if they're a personality fit. And one of the areas where we find military veterans to be really, really good fit for our industry, and they may not have a degree. I mean, they already come with the mindset that they understand safety, they understand hierarchy, they understand the pace and the urgency of the matter. The work that we do, the slightest mistakes could have significant impact. You may very well take out an entire electrical grid if you make a mistake, right? So personality and the willingness to learn and ability to be able to coordinate and collaborate in a transparent fashion, those are comes at the top. I feel like that's more important than, oh, let's see, this person's resume is really, really shiny. So
yeah, I mean, military veterans, it's like they come through a different training mindset. It's a mindset more than necessarily is like skills-based learning. Sometimes it may be, but it's a mindset that comes out of that, which is interesting. How do you translate sort of that same type of mindset to, let's say, non-veterans, women, people outside the energy marketplace that you want to bring in and be able to measure, define those skills to say, all right, this is the right fit. This is a Paxon employee.
Well, that's all part of the training, right? It's called on-the-job learning. And it takes, one-on-one shadowing. It takes group team. It takes setting the metrics and kind of like lessons learned, because you are required to respond. We have all these deadlines that are set, not by us, by our clients. And everything is like a domino effect, and everybody has to follow. So I feel like our industry, the pace of it is like you're a nurse in an ER. Like, things are moving very, very quickly, and it's not necessarily for the faintest of heart, but it's exciting. This is when you are getting challenged, that's when you're learning the most. And that's why that personality and the resiliency and the ability to be able to coordinate and speak up is really important. We have a culture of speaking up. We have a culture of, stop work. Anybody at any ranking can go to a job site. If they see any safety matters, they are empowered to call a stop. And it doesn't matter. You could have 100 to 400 people, and it has nothing to do with the hierarchy, but empowering people to understand the power of mind and ability and to work on that.
It's one thing to say that, but I mean, this is like, how do you make that happen? Because a lot of people are, especially with military, hierarchy is important. I got to follow the rules. I got to follow the leader on this thing. So how do you empower to say, listen, or also recognize it when it happens to share, this is really why it's important. Everybody speak up.
So all of these things, house that you're asking about for us, comes into our daily huddles, the safety job meetings, every project that we're doing. These things get communicated on a daily basis, on a meeting basis, on a project basis. So if you keep hearing it, and there is a level of expectations, you are required to, and if you're not, that somebody else is going to tap you on your shoulder and be like, this is what you're missing. So the level of repetition almost makes it easier to kind of get into the flow of the things. But when it comes to safety and execution, it's a matter of every meeting, daily, monthly, quarterly, all the time.
So you're continuing to grow. You have, I think, 100 plus positions that you're trying to fill and hire for right now. So how do you continue to keep expanding and extending the culture as you're growing? Because you, as CEO, can't be everywhere. So how do you instill that into your management, but also how do you instill that into the next levels down to create that repeated like mindset shift so that it's part of the overall culture and not just the management culture?
I think growth is so exciting. And I think I've been on this roller coaster of growth trajectory for the past 6.5 years. Hiring right and getting the right people into the right seat is even more important, because you have to have the right foundation and empowering those individuals. If you're hiring your managers or if you're hiring your executives, the leadership's job is not to manage the people, is to lead. And finding the right leaders into those roles is really important. Delegating is another art that I think a lot of the CEOs or management struggle with. And it's the ability that you trust in your team members, that you know if you're not there, the execution happens and the things are in place. So for us, we have equally, as we're growing, filling in positions, we are growing into our leadership roles, and whether promoting from within or bringing the trained personnel from outside, I think that art of delegation, hiring the right people, they go hand in hand to feed the growth and manage it properly.
Right. But having a culture that's consistent, I'm sure, is a key part of that too. I want to shift over to talk a little bit about innovation and risk-taking. Companies here are all thinking about, all right, I got to stay ahead. I want to be the disruptor, not the disrupted. So I need my R&D teams to be taking some risks in their thought process and things like that. It's a little bit of a different dynamic when it comes to your business, where risk-taking, you also have to be keeping in mind safety is obviously a paramount characteristic of the technology and the clients you're serving. So can you talk us through a little bit about sort of like how like the innovation mindset is at your company? It's a little bit of a different concept of culture, but how do you also embrace the risk-taking similar to what it was when you said, hey, I'm going to start this business?
I think for me, at least, innovation is a mindset. I don't go sit and be like, I'm going to find the next thing that's going to disrupt. Our mindset as a company is, how can we find the solution? We are consultant. Our job is to help our clients and the energy companies operate better, more efficient, at a lower cost. If that means finding the right platform for the hydrogen energy or for the wind, finding the next renewable, finding the biofuel, so be it. The engineering solution is not coming up with problems and saying, how can I become the next big thing? I think for us, where we are, we're at a turn with the energy sector, where the once .com era was, and you kind of see that with the AI. What you see with the energy is that everybody is willing to change. We're no longer operating assets similar to 50 years ago. So as part of that, all of us are learning together. And we are coming up and testing, trial and error. This works, that doesn't make sense. This is great. Like take hydrogen, for instance. There's a lot of buzz around hydrogen, but hydrogen is highly flammable. You can transfer it across the state at mass scale. At the smaller scales, it's possible, but how do you build? When you look at energy, you always have to think about mass distribution. And when you think about disruption, when you reach that mass, I think the disruption automatically happens. And the same thing has happened when you saw country-level commitments to ESG. And then they added a timeline to it. And then everybody was, first it was 2050, and then some states or countries that are like 2030, and then some that 2045. So then you're kind of like challenging yourself. But the art of disruption, I think the key for that is curiosity and the willingness to learn, evolve, and grow.
So for the time horizon for the innovations that you want your team to develop, obviously urgency is key, because you got to keep delivering results when you're not necessarily the big competitors, but you also know your competitors now have looked at what your success has been and said, hey, we should try to attack that marketplace too. So how do you instill in them the urgency to say, all right, like, I want you to be curious. I want you to come to me with like the next, good ideas to solve these client problems, but we got to do it fast and it's got to be safe.
You have hard deadlines and then you have soft launching dates, right? And really is you understand the gaps in the market, and then you're like, it's a continuous discussion with the two. And you also have to have the buy-in. You have to have the buy-in from every single member. And at the same time, as you're developing into a new realm, you have to build in capacity. I cannot hope that this engineer is going to come with the amazing idea if they're bogged down with all these other operational work that they have to do. So building the right capacity, establishing soft and hard deadlines, and before all of that, know what you're going after. It's like, what is the gap in the market and who is not touching it? And sometimes the low-hanging fruits are actually the best ones because all the big companies are all focused on the biggest things out there. And then the smallest thing you pick, actually, eventually, when it reaches the scale, it becomes a big disruption.
Do you have any examples of like what that was like in real life in terms of like the way your sort of innovations have come to market? Anything that you can share?
I'm not at the liberty of sharing yet.
Okay.
But maybe if you talk to me in 6 months, yes.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll come back and we'll sit again next year and you can tell us all about that. Digital transformation is not something that is often thought of with the energy industry. And so I imagine when you're talking about measuring what companies are doing with their methane, how much they're releasing, and then installing your technology and platform on top of it to sort of help address these things. What does the digital transformation look like in the energy industry? And what is the next steps that needs to happen to sort of comply with some of these ESG, capabilities that need to be and requirements that are being put in place by the government?
I think digital transformation is absolutely key for the energy sector. When you think about, like, take electrical grids, for instance, if you can manage it better, if you can reduce the waste and the flow of energy, the cost to consumer and the energy company also becomes lower. Then at the same time, you can think about the establishing predictive maintenance, right? And machine learning is a key aspect of it. As obviously we're in a cyber conference, as these cyber attacks get evolve and they become smarter and smarter, these energy companies are equally evolving because they run these very complex computer models and systems. And a slightest mistake could take out a whole grid and it would become a big issue all across. And we help, for instance, PG&E here in California with their public safety power shutoff program, which was done in response to wildfires and heavy winds, and finding the right technologies, where it goes and how it goes. These are all key factors to a stronger grid system. So energy companies are they're shifting, maybe not at the pace of the tech companies, because the responsibility of being able to provide a non-stop energy. And what happened in California, I mean, I reside here, we didn't have power for 4 or 5 days. What did that do? Your phone goes out, your laptop doesn't work, and then the cell towers are backed up by backup generators that eventually run out of battery. It's a huge safety problem.
And so the ESG, well, so the final question is, like, ESG area sometimes gets caught up in a lot of discussions about purely just environmental piece of it, but there's obviously multi-layers to it. Because you just talked about a safety component, you talked about productivity, you talked about all these things. From your perch, like, what is the ESG conversation going? What should we be optimistic about as we head into the next few years about the ESG conversation overall?
I think in that sense, I agree with you. The environmental social governance, that's the social and governance side of it. It's an American thing. It's a geopolitical thing that as a country, we started switching into, yes, we need more diversity in our workforce. We need to be more open to our employees. So that the social and governance, it does get practice in the energy sector where, let's say, I'm a female-owned company, I'm a diverse company, and they report on their diversity spend. So it is a true practice where you get a company like Paxon, we have the environmental footprint reduction, we are a diverse firm, so you cover that. But to me, the environmental side of it is very, very different than the rest. sustainability of the future and the way we're providing energy of the today may or may not have anything to do with someone's, heritage. And also, when you go to other countries, this notion of diversity is not so much of the matter of questions, right? They would all be considered diverse in a sense. So I feel like in the next few years, there will be a next level separation. We also need to properly establish metrics. Right now, there's a lot of gray areas. These are all all over the map. We do not have a standardized, systematic reporting on our sustainability footprint. We just don't. And these are the shifts and it's similar to a startup, because in a startup, in any department, a person may wear very, very different types of hats, but as the departments are getting better established, they become their own swim lane. And I think that's where you see that separation happening.
Okay. Final question. So you walk into a lot of meetings as a female founder of color. What advice can you give to other founders out there that might be saying, all right, I have to go into a meeting where I'm going to be the only one in that meeting that looks like me? What's your advice for those founders and those aspiring founders out there of how to handle that situation?
I once walked into a meeting with over 100 attendees that were all men. And I actually went to the executives and I'm like, did you understand? And as I was going down the podium, each row the heads were turning and they're like, who is this woman entering this room, right? It no longer phases me. I feel like I've built in the skin that I don't even notice it anymore. That's just the environment that I'm operating. But there is definitely I've been told I should just sit and listen, right? So I said one thing, that it's not enough to be resilient. You have to be relentless. One thing that's amazing, I'm not born and raised here. I'm born and raised in Iran. And what I find amazing, and I say God bless America, is that we all have the same right and we should exercise it. If you're in a meeting, you're a female, doesn't matter. I mean, my leadership style is more democratic and transformational. I work alongside with everybody. I don't care what your role is. You speak up for what you believe in. And for as long as you believe in it, I empower you to have a voice. And I think that's something that I would advise a lot of other female founders, that listen to the voice in your head and vocalize it. It's not meant to just stay there.
Believe. Powerful statement to end on. Thank you for sharing your inputs. Thank you for sharing your views. Round of applause for Nooshin, everybody. Thank you.